This is the Project Cambridge podcast.
Hello, and we're back with you again for episode 4 of the Project Cambridge podcast. Can't believe it's episode 4 already. But this time we're welcoming Paul Beastall, who is CEO of Cambridge-based HutanBio. Now, as usual, before I introduce Paul properly, I just want to remind everybody of what we aim to achieve through the podcasts. So it's all about bringing you really cool stuff going on in the Cambridge area, some seriously interesting people, fascinating tech and science, how the city and area are growing, and really how you can get involved. So we also want to make it really, really inclusive and accessible for everybody. And that's why we really do try to use basic, easily digestible tech language, rather than make you feel like you're in a chemistry or a physics lecture. So finally, please do pop any questions or comments that you've got in the comments boxes. We really do want to get your feedback. And just one final thing, please be aware, as you can see, we're not recording in a studio today. I'm at home, Paul's in his office. There's every chance of one of my lovely but very annoying cats might try to interfere with the production in some way. They've kept out of the previous 3 episodes, but I know what they're like, so watch out. So now that we've got the really boring stuff out of the way and the housekeeping, I'd like to introduce you to Paul Beastall from HutanBio.
Hi, Jen. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us, Paul. So we've known each other well for probably well over a decade, from parkrun and running clubs and things like that. And that goes right back to your days and your career at PA Consulting. So, Paul, I know a lot of things have changed in your career over that time. Can we start by talking about that and how really you've evolved from working in telecoms to now working in engineering biology?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think actually it's not just that angle, it's also working in an R&D lab through to actually being commercial. I've kind of had 2 different journeys. So a very long time ago now, I studied electronic systems engineering at York, and I went to work for BT in their research labs back in the mid-90s. And that was because telecoms was the biggest system around at that time. It was the biggest machine on the planet. And this is before the iPhone, this is before broadband. We were using modems that made funny squeaky noises to access the internet, and it was incredibly slow. So it was a really exciting time. And I kind of stayed in telecoms for about the first decade of my career. And it started to get a bit boring because actually it was just doing more of the same, making it a little bit quicker, making it a little bit cheaper. And that's kind of when I started expanding my horizons. But the first big move is I moved to Cambridge after about 5 years in my career, into my first commercial role. And I came to Cambridge for a job. I've lost count how many I've had since I moved, but I've been here 25 years.
Wow.
And, Cambridge is absolutely home now. But, during that time, I've moved into, realized very early on, innovation and research is pointless unless it's useful. I had a boss at BT who said innovation is useful technology. Technology for the sake of it isn't useful. So that's kind of guided my thoughts. And through that time, as you mentioned, with consultancies, I've done everything from working with governments on really big, exciting projects, both here and internationally, and also really cool new technology. So, my last big project when I was at Cambridge Consultants, before I left to start doing other things, was actually using AI to monitor pet health. Now, there are no world experts on using AI to monitor pet health because it's new. And so I've always been drawn to these new and exciting things. And for me, biology is just another bit of that. So biology is part of the system. Humans are part of the system. So it's actually how all these technologies interact to change something is really what excites me.
Yeah, and I guess the pet technology stuff, I guess that really interested you, being a dog owner yourself, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And this was during COVID. This was the client was in the US. They kind of caught me out eventually, because every time, in consulting and engineering development, there's always good meetings and bad meetings. Something's gone well, something hasn't gone well. I remember the client saying to me, Every time you have your puppy on your lap for a call, it means you're going to tell me bad news, and you're hoping that she distracts me. So they kind of saw through it. But yeah, it was great. It was great working on animal health, and again, useful, bringing technology to do something new.
Yeah, awesome. So obviously there must be such a different set of challenges now that you're working with early stage startups and talking to VCs, trying to get your Series A funding, writing grant applications and proposals. That must be tough sometimes, and probably quite overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah, it's certainly a roller coaster. Let's put it like that. It's not. I was probably lucky. I flipped between big corporate and startups throughout my career. So I worked for a startup back in the early 2000s that didn't end well, like lots of them didn't. Grew to over 100 people and then shrank back down to nothing. But that gives me the benefit of not just having been in a leadership role in the startup, but actually having been a member of the team and realizing what's important from that team. Because actually startups need three things. They need cool technology, something to get going. They need a really good team of people that are really committed, and they need money to execute. And kind of my job is to bring all three together. And I love building teams. I absolutely love bringing people together, forming a team, and then doing something amazing. And HutanBio is great for that, because we're half based in Malaysia, half based in the UK. So the team dynamics are a really interesting and exciting problem. But you're right, at the moment, raising money is really hard. And we're really lucky. We're backed by some amazing investors already, including some key individuals. Some of the founders of CMR, Surgical, supported us in the very early days to help us get going. And then, we brought in Clean Growth Fund and the UK Innovation and Science Seed Fund. And they're all really engaged. They're the best group of investors I've ever worked with. And I'm not just saying that because I want money from them. It's true. And I love telling the story. The challenge is, at the moment, I've told the story more than 100 times to investors, and people are really nervous about investing money in big infrastructure because it's expensive. Because of what's happening in the US, they're nervous about investing in climate tech because they don't know what the future holds at the moment. My view is this is brilliant, because we'll get all the foundation work done before the political environment changes and catches back up with the view that we do need to do something about climate change. So actually, I see that as a positive. And actually, with just the economy is a bit more shaky, so people are much more nervous about investment. So the bar to get over to get investment is higher. So at the moment, all my time is spent talking to investors, and I'm not doing the fun bit of running the company as much as I would like. Yeah,
you've really just got to get your head down and keep pushing on, haven't you?
Yeah.
So, Paul, you joined HutanBio, well, it's probably nearly 3 years ago now, wasn't it? At the end of 2022 as the chair. And then shortly after that, a few months later, you went on to become CEO. So for our viewers and listeners, can you please walk us through the science and engineering involved and tell us what the mission is? And this is where we need to remember to speak in those really kind of basic terms and tech language so that everyone can understand. It's really cool.
So mission, I'll start with the easy bit. Our mission is to decarbonize long distance transport. So transport is really important. We have a world now where you can't stop moving goods and people around the planet. So actually, it's about, I think, 14% of the overall CO2 emissions of the planet is transport. So how do we decarbonize those? And our technology to help us do that, two strands. One is science and one is engineering. So if we start with science, our core value asset is a unique family of microalgae. And I'm just going to do a little bit of science for a minute. There's two sorts of algae: macroalgae, which is seaweeds; microalgae, which is little single cell organisms. They're both called algae. They've got very little in common. They're different things. So what we're talking about is little tiny blobs, little tiny green blobs, single cell organisms, effectively, that are plants. And what they do is what all plants do. If you remember back to your school biology, they take in CO2, they throw out oxygen, and they grow. So that's what they do. So our plants, algae absorb CO2, they absorb carbon dioxide, they produce oxygen. This is a good thing from a decarbonisation point of view. And if they've got some fertilizers, they grow. So they grow by cell division. So you end up with one cell, then you get 4, then you get 16, then you get 64, then you get 256, and then my math starts running out at that point. But it grows really quickly. But the really exciting thing is if there isn't any fertilizer available, if they can't make the plant matter, they still photosynthesize, but they lay down fat reserves that they can then use if they come across fertilizer in the future. And that fat reserve is an oil, and it's an oil that can be used as fuel. So that's the really cool bit. And that's what our academic founders who met here in Cambridge, worked together for over a decade in Saudi Arabia as academics before founding the company. That's what they discovered. But what you can't do is grow at massive scale to grow in a fuel to actually help decarbonize long distance transport without some really cunning engineering as well. So on the engineering side, we grow, algae grows in salt water. This is really important. It grows in seawater, which means we're not competing with agriculture and human needs for fresh water. Really important. One of the things I'm really strong about is we cannot drive food poverty so that I can fly away on holiday. That just feels morally terrible to me. And that's part of the ethos of the company. But we need to get lots of sunlight in. So what we do, we grow in seawater on land. So we grow in what we call thin film photobioreactors, which is a really fancy term for plastic bags. They're pretty clever plastic bags, but they are plastic bags, and they're engineered to optimize the growth of the algae. We pump CO2 through the algae and the water, so it's got something to feed on. And we grow this at massive scale. So, when I talk about my plans for the future, I'm talking about multiple square kilometers of this, which again sounds terrifying if you live in East Anglia where fields are measured in acres. But I've been out in Western Australia and in central Morocco where farms are 100 square kilometers. So, people do agriculture on this scale already.
The oil. So we know you're looking at long distance shipping and trains and things, but you're also sort of further processing that bio-crude oil into sustainable aviation fuel, aren't you? Can you go into that a little bit further for us?
Yeah, so we're not going to do that directly because, again, fundamentally, there are people spending billions, I mean literally billions of pounds on building oil refineries that take bio oils, that take bio crude and turn it into sustainable aviation fuel, or also turn it into the additives that go into petrol. So your normal petrol, or actually your normal diesel in a diesel car is now B5 or B7, I think, at the pump. So that means that a small percentage of it is biofuel. And at the moment, a lot of that oil comes from plant crops. So it comes from used cooking oil. So this is oil that's been used for cooking, is then cleaned up and used. So you may have seen for years, McDonald's have said we run our vans on our chip fat. The challenge is there's a finite supply of used cooking oil. There's not very much of it in the world because we don't actually use that much on a scale compared with running ships around the planet. And we've had a bit of a challenge. The BBC and The Guardian reported on this earlier this year that quite a lot of used cooking oil isn't very used. So it's vegetable oil that's been farmed directly for fuel, which means it is taking water supply that could be used for food. It is driving deforestation in places like Indonesia, and it is doing more damage than we want. And the world's waking up to that, and is putting a lot more stipulation on the sort of bio oils that you can use to make biofuels from. And that's where we come in. So we can provide a source to these people that are already building refineries who have suddenly had a bit of a shock that they don't necessarily know how they're going to fill them. So we can be part of that solution. And so, some of these are the big oil companies. We're talking to, I can't name names, but we're talking to people whose logos you'd recognize from petrol forecourt, both here and in North America, but also some really innovative startups that are looking at massive infrastructure projects to create this fuel. And so they take this bio crude, and then there's two routes they've got. They can either feed it in with a bit of oil, a bit of it in with normal oil, process it all in one go, and so what comes out at the end is some fuel with a bit of bio in it, and that's called co-processing. Or they can go all in and they can do a much more sophisticated process where they work purely with bio oil, and then they make a bio-sustainable aviation fuel that then is blended at the end into the ratios that are needed by regulation. And fundamentally what they do, little bit of chemistry, please excuse me, our molecule has 3 fingers on it effectively. Yeah. Whereas the oil we burn in engines is single string. So first thing we do is we kind of break the hub up. So we make it into these strands. And then heavy oils are longer molecules. So the thicker the oil, the longer the molecule. Jet fuel needs really light molecules. So it's like kerosene, it's like paraffin. So it's light, sloshes around. And so you need to shorten those molecules a little bit. So again, there's a chemical process where you just take our stuff and you kind of chop it in half, fundamentally. Yeah. That's £1 billion written off just by saying you chop it in half, but that's kind of how it is. So the logic for us using other people to do that is they've got a problem that they need what's called feedstock, stuff to put in the top of their refinery. They understand the regulatory regime of putting this in aeroplanes. We're a very small company. We don't have the capacity to worry about that stage. We worry about making sure what goes into the refinery is good, but it's much better for us to partner. I always say to my team, let's focus on the bits that only we can do.
Yeah. Because
actually I've seen too many startups struggle by trying to do too much and then try and boil the ocean and actually let's do the bits we're really good at and partner for the other bits.
Makes total sense. So I just want to talk a little bit more about the technology and about the process, because it's so you're talking about this photobioreactor, and it's essentially, as you said, a big plastic bag. In fact, they kind of look a bit like, I don't know, a transparent lilo or a sleeping bag with the sort of channels in them, don't they? And you hang them up, you chuck them in the desert, ideally, so they get loads and loads of sunlight. And then you put your microalgae in there. You obviously, you grow it in a whole load of salt water from the ocean, and then you harvest it in what you call your vineyard for, I think it's 35 days, isn't it? And then you separate your algae from what is now your oil, which is the fat reserves, as you told us. You use a solvent to do that. And then, Paul, tell us what you do with your leftover algae. And I hope I've got all of that process right, by the way.
You have. I'm just going to expand a little bit if you'll give me the luxury of doing that. So, yeah, pretty much that. So first thing, deserts typically have a lot of sunlight, and the algae is one of the most photosynthetically efficient organisms on the planet. So it can cope with all that sunlight. But the other thing about deserts is they're really bad at growing stuff, because there's no water. So again, this is land that's not used for farming. So there's vast swathes. We've done a desktop analysis. There's over 300,000 square kilometers of suitable desert land within 15 kilometers of the sea. That's massive. And overall, there's 25 million square kilometers of desert in the world. So there's lots of land that we can't use for anything useful. And I'm not sure my technical team would like we chuck it in, but we kind of do. So we grow the algae in a nursery first, so in a little nurtured environment where we grow it to the stage where it's really, so we make toddler algae where it's ready to really start running ahead. And then we put it in the photobioreactors. We feed it some fertilizers so that it grows. And then we feed it CO2, and we also pump air in as well to keep it moving, because what you want to do is make sure that all the algae gets a fair chance of being at the surface of the photobioreactor, so it gets the maximum sunlight and then kind of wanders it back inside again. And we do that for roughly 4 weeks, and during that time it's busy, it's growing by cell division. The photobioreactors, the liquid in them goes from almost clear to quite a deep green color. So we can monitor the growth, and then we get a bit nasty to it, and we starve it. We turn off the fertilizer, and then for the last week, what it does is it lays down its oil. So up until that point, it's just plant matter, and then it lays down its oil, and then we get really nasty and we harvest it. That means we drain the tanks, we filter the algae out from the water, and then the first thing we do is what biologists call lyse. We lyse the cells. What that means is we mash them up. We basically smash them up, so we break them open such that we can then get access. So at that point, we have what we call a slurry, which is bits of biology and the oil all together in a gloopy liquid. And then we use the solvent to bring bring the oil out, and that goes off to oil processing. And then on the what we call the biomass side, the green kind of slimy slop that we've got left, we dry that out to make it into a kind of powdery substance, and that's plant matter. So that's green plant stuff. It's high in protein. It's got carbohydrate in there, and so that can then be used as animal feed. And again, if you think about where we're targeting growing in the desert, one of the challenges for food security is desert countries find it hard to grow enough food for the protein stocks. Mm-hmm. I know you like your holidays, you're well traveled. You'll have seen the really skinny goats and sheep in really hot locations where they don't get much food. So what we can do is actually help countries grow fat sheep as a byproduct. And actually, when you talk to the governments in these desert countries, they're almost as excited about that as they are about the fuel, because it gives them the opportunity to grow independence and resilience in their food chain.
That's fascinating. So it's a second revenue stream for you guys as well, which is great and really, fully sustainable.
And now just a very short pause in the podcast so we can tell you about one of the events Project Cambridge is supporting.
The Local Skills Improvement Plan for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, or LSIP for short, welcome you to a free event on Friday the 26th of September. The LSIP work closely with employers and local authorities to ensure our region's workforce is future ready. Join us at Anglia Ruskin University in Peterborough for a skills summit, where we'll explore how major businesses are shaping the future of the workforce through meaningful investment in skills. We'll hear from keynote speakers and listen to panel discussions with organizations who are taking real action and seeing huge impact. Discover how industry is powering inclusive growth, building talent pipelines, and future-proofing regions through bold, skills-focused strategies. Joining us on the day, we'll hear from Form the Future, Paragraph, also Anglian Water, East West Rail, Skills England, Urban and Civic, Baker Perkins and Sizewell C, as well as Charlotte Horrobin, CEO of Cambridgeshire Chambers of Commerce, and others joining us too. So, if you're an employer, maybe a head of HR or talent, and you want to discover how you can unlock your future talent pool, we'd love to welcome you to the Skills Summit at Anglia Ruskin University on Friday the 26th of September. And don't forget, it's free! Sign up today at www.cambridgeshire.chamber.co.uk and go to our events page. See you there!
We'll be back to the episode in just a moment, but if you'd like to feature an event that you're hosting through the Project Cambridge podcast, let us know and we'd be happy to help you. Now, back to the episode.
So then talking about that sustainability further, so you're making animal feed from the waste, and you're reusing the salt water. Your bags, you can recycle and reuse them, and you're doing this all on land, which is, it's really desert land, which isn't fit for agriculture normally. And there's not much going on this land. So it all really does sound fully sustainable and actually like a smart agriculture business. And it's even going to provide jobs for people as well. Is that all correct?
Yeah. And I think the jobs one's really interesting. Lots of jobs during construction. Actually, we're doing as much automation as we can. So we are a smart agriculture business that grows fuel, not food. Mm. And some of that is because actually these desert locations are not places where people will probably want to live with their families. By definition, they're hot, relatively inhospitable. So we're trying to limit the number of people that we actually require to run the plant, but make those jobs high value. So they're quite, they're biologists and they're people that have good jobs, which means, so we're looking at Morocco as our first deployment site. We're talking to, the universities there, the government, not just about land use and certification, but also skills development and those sort of things as well.
Yeah. So you're looking at North Africa and you're also looking at Western Australia, is that right?
That's right, yeah. And kind of the reason for that, and long term also kind of Mexico, Peru, Chile. And the reason is that actually those three areas give us access to the biggest markets. So Australia, you can grow fuel to then move into Southeast Asia, where there's a big demand for sustainable aviation fuel. You can serve North America from Central and Southern America. You can serve Europe from North Africa. And then the fourth area is the Middle East. So, long term, the Middle East has an economy built on oil. But, we know eventually that's going to run out. So we're having more strategic conversations in the Middle East about longer term routes to moving to bio oil production. Because again, it's very deserty in places like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, places like that.
Yeah. And what are we talking about potentially with the timeline, and what milestones do you have to achieve to enable that all going forward?
So the next big stage is our first desert plant. So that's what we're raising money for at the moment. Assuming that goes according to plan, we'll be building a plant in Morocco next year. And that will move us from kind of pilot scale in Malaysia. So we've been growing the algae outdoors in agricultural conditions for the last 18 months. But this will let me move from litres of oil to tons of oil, at which point we can then prove it through a refining process. Hopefully, my dream is run a plane where some of the fuel in that plane has been grown by our algae. That's kind of the key thing. And then it's just a case of kind of building from there. So from there, we'll build our first 1 square kilometre plant, which is probably the scale we need to hit the unit economics, to hit the price point that we need. And then from there, I want to grow as fast as we can, because, this is a business that's going to do well, hopefully. But it's also addressing the climate emergency, and the word emergency is kind of critical in this. If we take too long to do this, things are going to get worse, So actually, once we've proved the 1 square kilometre, my expectation is that we'll end up scaling very quickly through partnerships with local partners. So we won't try and do it again. We won't try and do it all ourselves. I don't plan to build a company of 80,000 people headquartered in Cambridge. It's not what Cambridge is great at. We'll own the IP, and then we'll partner with the people that are used to building oil refineries and big kind of industrial complexes to grow quickly. Yeah.
So you're kind of back and forthing, Paul, at the moment, aren't you? Obviously, Malaysia, where all of the biology happens, and all the testing and so on. But obviously, you're checking out these other places, and I know you've been over to Western Australia. One thing I did want to ask you, so for people that don't know Paul, he's very, very involved with parkrun, and was one of the event directors at Cambridge Parkrun or Milton a few years ago. So I know, Paul, you like to get parkruns in, don't you? Have you managed to get any parkruns in while you've been over in Australia at all?
Yes, both sides. So Perth, I've done a couple. Sydney, I've done a couple. I didn't, when I was in the Pilbara region, which is the kind of deserty area in the far north of Australia, I wasn't there over a weekend, so that didn't work. Also, there's one in Malaysia that's about 20k from our facility, so I've done that a couple of times. It's a bit awkward because in Malaysia, Saturday morning's a working day. So I kind of have to rock up to the office a little bit late, but I think that's my prerogative. And a lot of these trips end up hubbing through Singapore as kind of the regional hub. And yes, I've done 3 of the 5 in Singapore as well from when I've been there. Because normally these trips out to Asia and Australia, they're typically 2.5 weeks. It's not like you can nip down for a couple of days. And so I do try and actually see a little bit of the country during the weekends, and parkrun's one of the ways to do that. When I was last in Perth, I went up into the desert on a coach tour on the Saturday afternoon to then go stargazing in the desert in the evening.
Wow.
And would you believe it? It was the one day of rain they'd had in the last 400 days, and there was no astronomy. But that's life. I do try. It's work hard, but also if I'm getting the opportunity to go to these amazing places, it's a shame not to see a little bit over the weekend while I'm there.
Yeah, and take your photography kit at the same time, I'm sure.
I have done. Not much, but because I'm normally quite busy. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I saw kangaroos. It was absolutely awesome. Last time I was there, I went up into the desert, came face to face with the kangaroo, and
wow.
You just those sort of moments are just awesome.
Yeah. So for a Cambridge-based company, you're doing an awful lot of travel, aren't you? And it's stretching really to the opposite end of the world. So, I mean, Paul, I actually interviewed you and James Ibbison, who's also from HutanBio. James is CTO, isn't he?
That's right. Yeah.
And that was a year ago when I was working with the One Group. And it's fascinating to see how things have been moving forward since we spoke back then, and the growth of the company. But I just wanted to ask you, Paul, if there was one thing that you could tell the Paul from a year ago, what would that be?
It's a really good question, and there's so many things. One of the things I love about life, I always say, the day I stop learning in a job is the day I need a new job. And this job is giving me so many learning opportunities. But I think I'm going to cheat and say two. One of them is keep the faith. Obviously a bit of a Bon Jovi quote, but it's that just keep going. It's really hard. It's a roller coaster. There's many days I've had to get up in the morning, kind of shake myself down, dust myself off, get up, put my brave suit on and go again. And resilience is really important. But the thing that enables that is remember the mission.
Yeah.
Actually, what we're doing here, and this is what drew me to HutanBio. Not every company has a mission where everybody I speak to says, wow, that's amazing. Everybody gets it. I just never have to explain the why. And remembering that for me and for my team is really important.
Yeah, whilst you're doing all these really difficult things and things that are taking a long time, ultimately you're saving the planet, which is, oh wow, you're getting up every day and you're going to work to save the planet. I love that. So whilst we're on this theme, I want to go back a further step. In fact, probably let's say 20 years ago. So this is Paul working in systems engineering, probably going back to, I don't know, might have been BT days. But say 20 years ago in your career, what would you have changed or have done differently, if anything at all? Or is it all just part of the journey? Don't regret a thing?
I don't regret much. I've been incredibly lucky. I've had some really good bosses. I've had a couple of terrible bosses we won't go into, but I've had generally really good bosses. And it was actually about 20 years ago, my boss at that time was my first non-technical boss. And that was a really interesting part of my journey. Up to that point, I'd worked with people that you could kind of nerd with. And in BT, I was on a special project, and my boss was a lawyer, no interest in technology at all. And it taught me that different people think differently. And so you need to communicate in different ways to take people on a journey with you. I actually got as far in an annual performance review as being told I bludgeoned people with facts, which is quite a technical thing to do. I've got the data. Do you want to hear the data? And actually, some people that doesn't matter because they don't process the data. So I think, just that journey of learning, there's some really meaningful points. So BT working with a non-technical person was one. This was also the boss who said career planning is a load of rubbish. You can't plan your career because you don't know what's coming along. All you can do is plan your skills and experience. If something cool and exciting comes along, you can be ready to take it. And so I think I probably specialized a bit too early, and it took me a long time to back away from that. So actually, some of these opportunities that have come along, as you said, into the engineering biology space, I couldn't have planned because it didn't really exist at that time. So it's about having those general skills, I think, is really important. And then PA Consulting gave me a massive foundation in how to communicate complexity in a way that people can follow and understand and buy in. And I see this in Cambridge so often. If you can't tell your story, then you can't take people on the journey, be that investors, be that regulators, be that journalists, whoever it is. You need to be able to tell your story and get people excited about what you're doing. Yeah.
And we're hearing about communication skills being so important. In the previous episode 3, we had Marcus from Super Dielectrics also saying that's such an important thing for engineers as well, because you need to present and those skills can be gained from doing all sorts of things outside of work, sports and music and so on. And I like that you also mentioned, Paul, that you'd have never have said that you'd be working in engineering biology because it didn't exist. And same for me, because I certainly wouldn't have said, oh, I'm going to have a podcast, because none of us knew what that was going to be. And that's the message that trying to drum home to young people today, is that be curious, be open-minded, because the job that you're going to end up doing, it might be that it doesn't even exist right now. Really fascinating.
I think the other thing I'd add to that, what is also just come to me, is don't be afraid to be afraid. So some things are nerve-wracking, some things are terrifying. You mentioned parkrun. I used to stand up in front of 600 people and give a briefing at parkrun. I hated every single one of them. I loved it when it was done, but I genuinely used to quiver a bit before I had to stand up and do that. And yet that put me in really good stead. I'm presenting in London International Shipping Week in a couple of weeks, about a month's time in London. The audience is 150. It's like, done that every Saturday morning, So
Easy.
actually, it's those skills that you build, as you say, not just in work, but around your life can help you understand what you need to do. But it can be terrifying. It really can. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it.
Yeah, I like that. Don't be afraid to be afraid, and really show that vulnerability is really important for your growth. I like that a lot. So, Paul, thank you so much for coming on. I met you, didn't I, about just over a week ago, wasn't it, at Parkrun, actually? And I said, Paul, when are we going to do this podcast? And he said, Jen, I've missed your email. You haven't emailed me. And it was in the junk, But thank you. We turned this around really, really quickly. And you've been absolutely brilliant. I know there's some really important weeks and months upcoming for HutanBio. And really do wish you and the team all the best for the future moving ahead.
Thanks for that, and thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Brilliant. Well, everyone, that is the end of episode 4. And good news, cats haven't walked in front of the screen once. They've been silent, which is always a bonus. We hope you've enjoyed this. Don't forget to subscribe to us. I haven't said that yet on the podcast, but I'm going to say it now, because we're on Apple Podcasts. We're also on YouTube as well. So please do subscribe. And we're going to see you again soon for episode 5. See you soon.
This has been the Project Cambridge podcast.